Hello there, and welcome to another episode of The Metagame. I'm your host, Chaz Marler, and this is the show where we not only talk about board games, but also sometimes talk about talking about board games. And the way that this show format works is each episode will introduce a topic of discussion, and I'll give a short presentation with my experience on that subject. And then afterwards, we'll turn it over to the YouTube live chat area, and we'll do some back and forth Q&A discussion and deep thoughts about anything that comes up in the YouTube chat based on this topic of discussion or anything else that you guys come up with. As always, to help highlight any questions, comments, or statements that you have in the YouTube chat that you want to have considered for inclusion on the show, be sure to add the hashtag TMG to it. Because what I will do is when it gets to the time for me to look at the YouTube chat, I'm going to use my browser's search tool to search for that hashtag, and I will the search tool will highlight them, so I'll be able to find the statements that include that hashtag a lot easier. Now, of course, due to just the nature of the show and the way that the internet works, won't be able to get to every comment that has that hashtag, but I do try to go through the comments after the show to read through them all to read and make sure I don't miss anything. So, all right, I'm going to check our levels here to make sure the sound and everything's good. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I noticed that too. Someone just mentioned in the chat that the lighting seems muted. It's really strange. I noticed that too. I didn't know if it was just my monitor settings or what. I literally have lights. I can reach out and touch. I can touch the lights. They're within arm's reach. They're actually closer to me than they usually are, I think. So I don't know what's going on with the lighting. So, but regardless, hopefully you can see enough of me that anyone needs to see, and we can get started on today's topic. All right, today's topic, which is I crushed a second grader at Stratego. Now, this topic came along because last episode, whatever we were talking about, one of the side topics that came up through the chat was playing board games with children. And what kind of strategy do you employ when you play a board game with a kid? Do you pull your punches and let them win? Or do you play normally to teach them about winning and losing? What do you do to instill a love of board games in a kid, but also teach them that winning isn't everything and how to be a gracious loser and how games work? Well, so what I did is I kind of went through my mental archives, and I kind of remembered the first half dozen or so board and card games that I played. I introduced my own daughter to, who is currently 9 years old, but we started playing games when she was like 2 or even 1.5 or so. And I'll kind of get into that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through about a half dozen or so games, kind of in chronological order of how old she was when I introduced them to her, and kind of the approaches I took and what the results of those approaches were. And not only if I let her win, but little things I possibly did to keep my own sanity with some of these kid games. So let me move a couple windows out of the way here and make sure that we're okay. Cool. All right. So here's a list of the games that I introduced my daughter to and we played the most often as she was growing up. And before I get to the official list, I want to mention a couple of honorable mentions, like when she was 1.5 to 2 to 3 years old. These games that I introduced her to were 3 games by the publisher Blue Orange. These are Cuckoo the Rocking Clown, which isn't so much a game as just a clown on a kind of a rounded base, and he has little cup hands, and you put little cylinders in his hands, and he tips one way and tips the other. And my daughter was probably 1.5. This was one of the first modern board games published by a modern board game company that I got for her. And I was not so much impressed with the gameplay as I was impressed that she did not try to eat the pieces. So that made me really happy. So Cuckoo the Rocking Clown, also by Blue Orange, would be Froggy Boogie and Pengaloo. All three of those games are neat because they're colorful. They have thick wooden pieces. They're designed to be played with children. And other than Cuckoo, Froggy Boogie and Pengaloo actually do have some gameplay to them. They're pretty simple. Froggy Boogie is a kind of a roll and move game where you try to not get caught, and has a little bit of memory elements to it. And Pengaloo is more of a memory game where you have these penguins sitting on colored eggs, and you're trying to roll dice and remember which colored egg is under each of these wooden penguins. And so you roll the dice, get colors, and try to find which penguin has that color of egg. So they're pretty simple games. And they have really nice toy-like pieces, wooden pieces. And they were kind of the first batch of games that I introduced my own daughter to. But those are kind of just honorable mentions. Those were more like, hey, look, and we didn't really try to play, didn't try to compete or anything like that. The first game that I think we actually started playing, that we tried to actually play, and she realized, oh, there's a winner and a loser, and I can try to win, was the card game Go Fish. And this was probably when she was, I'd say, around 2.5 years old. We introduced her to Go Fish. And when we first started playing, she would actually need me to arrange her cards in her hand because they were, too many cards to hold, and her little kid hands couldn't hold them right. So I'd actually see her cards and lay them out. And sometimes she'd actually just lay them on the table instead of holding them in her hand. She'd lay them out, and I didn't realize that, I could see her cards, but it didn't matter to her. She was having fun. So there was not, the understanding of the child of, what to keep secret and stuff like that. That wasn't there. But making the sets and asking for certain cards to complete the sets was there. And so there was that comprehension and that understanding. And so Go Fish was like the first game that she asked to play, every single day. She'd ask to play Go Fish. And as a parent, tip, well, maybe not a tip, but what did I do? Because playing Go Fish can, become tiring after a while as a parent sometimes when you're playing a game of that simplicity level over and over again, but you want to because you're enjoying the time and you're enjoying seeing your child's reaction to it. So, but especially when there's no challenge at all because you can see their cards laid out. So as a parent, one thing I did to keep my sanity playing Go Fish day after day after day after day is I actually developed a game within the game in a way. What I did to stay sane is I started taking my cards. I would get my initial random deal of cards, and I would figure out a formula, almost like playing a programming type of game like Robo Rally or Volt. I'd come up with a formula, a methodology of how I'm going to play these cards, kind of rules for, I'm always going to play them in alphabetical order. I'm going to ask for, we played Go Fish with cards that had different fish and sea animals. So like I might play these in alphabetical order. So I'm always going to ask for crabs first, dolphins next, and then flounders after that. So might range up, or I might go by colors, like put them in the color of the rainbow from the artwork on the cards, and or even just the way I was dealt. So I would come up with these little mini formulas and the game that I would play would see if I could come up with just a robotic formula that would beat her or not. And that kept the game enjoyable as much as possible for me. And as time went on, she became more and more sophisticated at playing. But Go Fish eventually kind of ran its course. But that was the first game that she really discovered on her own and wanted to play, and discovered she liked playing and she came to me to play. And it was neat to see her evolve her gameplay over time. But Go Fish kind of ran its course. And oddly enough, the next modern board game that she was introduced to was probably when she was 4 years old. And that was, of all things, King of Tokyo. And I guess looking back when you have a child, and you know, when my daughter is our only child, so however old she is at that moment is as old as she's ever been. So we'd have no idea of what to really to compare to her level of understanding and comprehension of things, because to us she's always the oldest and smartest that she's ever been as she's been growing up. So it might have been a little bit of naivete to introduce a 4-year-old to a game like King of Tokyo, because it might be a little bit too sophisticated. But I remember before King of Tokyo came out, there was it was in Japanese, I think some YouTube video that someone made of a preview of King of Tokyo. And I think it was in Japanese, but it had like sound effects and the guy making sounds like roar and stuff for the monsters. And this was before the game was even released. And we were looking forward to King of Tokyo coming out, but we would watch that YouTube video like 3 times a day, over and over and over. We would watch this YouTube video together. She would ask for it. So she was really excited to see this game that was unlike any game she'd seen so far, with the big chunky dice, the monsters, and these neat sound effects and stuff that, anyway. So when King of Tokyo finally arrived, I was a little bit hesitant because of all the power-up cards that are included in it. And they all have text, and a 4-year-old, typically not able to read any of that yet. But I introduced her slowly. We kept the cards out at first, and I taught her the dice. I was surprised how quickly she figured out what all the dice do. She had a little, I believe, she didn't quite grasp the utility of the number dice, where if you get like 3 sets of a kind of a number, you'll get more stars. But she did eventually pick up on that too. But at first she focused on stars and hits and energy. But what really surprised me was how capable a 4-year-old was of playing King of Tokyo. Even when we introduced the power-up cards, because my daughter, my wife, and I would play King of Tokyo a lot. And so she would start to see the power-up cards that we would start to use. And even though she couldn't read the text, after just a few games, she started to recognize cards that she thought were really powerful. And she started to recognize strategies and combos, which floored me, blew me away, that a child of that age would start to see those things. And like I know she liked the Wings card because her mother would get that card and win all the time with it. But so she recognized which cards in King of Tokyo are more powerful, and she also developed her favorites. Like she liked the one where she could peek at the top card of the draw pile and maybe get that one instead of just the cards that are laid out. And apologies if you're not familiar with the game King of Tokyo. This discussion is going to assume some familiarity with the games that I talk about. I'm not going to go through and give tutorials on how each of the games works on this one, just for the sake of time. So I apologize for any confusion that may cause. But the point is that even with cards and dice and the mechanisms of moving in and out of Tokyo and damaging your other opponents and trying to be the last man standing, she got it and she enjoyed it, and we played it a lot. And the text on the cards was not as much of a barrier as I thought it might have been, because I was surprised how quickly she learned just based on the artwork what each of the cards did, and was able to figure out her favorites. So King of Tokyo was the first modern type real game that came in a box that we played. And that led to other things, over the course of her being 4, 5, 6 years old, introduced more things to her. Catan Jr., Takenoko. I'm looking at my game shelf here. Some of the other games we've played. Suro has been a really good one for her and our family growing up. Survive, even though it was brutal. Volt, Robot Battle Arena. As 5, 6, 7 years old when she hit that age, Volt has been a really big hit as well. That we all enjoy, and through that age, there's also been a few misses. Garden Dice is a really good game that I enjoy, but we don't play with all of the rules yet. I think next time we play, we probably will introduce everything. But there's an expansion of like cards that have certain extra rules. And with Garden Dice, you're placing your dice in this grid and planting seeds and then watering those seeds and harvesting the vegetables that you plant in your garden. So you have these dice that you roll and allocate on this grid, but then you can also put on sundials and scarecrows and rabbits and birds that can take people's seeds, move people's seeds, fudge people's dice, and we haven't played with any of those things. I think the biggest miss, though, of all, when playing with a child, and I don't know if it's just maybe she was tired or what, but fun fact, I have never played a game of Jamaica with my family that has not ended up with someone in tears. I don't know what it is about Jamaica. Again, I don't know if maybe the child was just tired, because that's always something to take into consideration. But some games just haven't worked, and we've had to just put them aside, shelve them for years sometimes. So that's another thing that we've learned. Some games are hits, some are misses. And when a game is a miss, you got to know when to just call it quits, wrap it up, and go do a different activity. Otherwise, if you try to press it, it will only end in tears. But that kind of comes with the territory, and that's something that's different kid by kid, of course, and you'll feel out as a parent. But as time goes on, and we kind of tried different games, the next game that came along that was a huge hit for her was Ascension. And now we're up to the point where she was about 7 years old. And Ascension, Ascension is more complex. Ascension is a deck building game where you'll have a row of, you'll have your starting hand of cards that have two types of currencies on them, attack power and purchasing power. And you'll have a row of cards laid out in the middle that sometimes are monsters to use your fight power to defeat. And sometimes they're things that you can add to your deck that you'll use your purchase power to obtain and add and cycle into your deck. And Ascension was, when I introduced it to her, I think she was around 6.5, 7.5 years old. And with that one, she took to it right away. She fell in love with Ascension. And I kind of, again, though, since it was a more of the first deck building game that we'd ever played, to keep her from getting overwhelmed, I used the simplest cards possible, and left out some of the more advanced things, like even constructs we didn't use at first, and some of the things with when you lay a card, fate, I think it is, when you lay a card down, it can have ripple effects on the cards next to it or something like that. Anyway, we've kept it really simple, so keep that in mind. We didn't play with all the rules. So, and I kind of reverted to my Go Fish thing a little bit, playing my hand, because again, this was a more complex deck builder game. So I kind of, instead of trying to play my hardest, I kind of developed a game within the game and kind of just let my hand play out how it would, for better or for worse. And while she kind of got used to and got acclimated to the game. Well, a couple of weeks went by, and we played Ascension every single night. Every single evening after work, she'd ask if we could play Ascension. And so I started thinking, oh, she's getting better at this. She's getting in the hang of it. This time, after a couple of weeks into it, I thought, this time I'm actually going to play. I'm going to give her a challenge, and I'm going to actually give it a good try. So in that game, I ended up being the victor, and she didn't cry like with Jamaica or get upset or anything like that. She's a very gracious loser, but she just quietly stopped asking to play Ascension after that. She's like, she quit cold turkey, and she has never asked to play Ascension again. So that got me wondering, is there a certain age where a child needs to still be coddled when you play with them, whether they realize it or not? Because she was really into Ascension, and just it dropped off her radar like that. So that was a little bit frustrating, but it's, whatever. I've asked a couple of times, maybe twice since then, the last couple of years, we'll play Ascension, and she always picks something else. So that was a strange experience, that the child was really enjoying a game and was saying it was one of their favorites, but the first time that they didn't win turned them off to the game completely, and they haven't wanted to play it since. So that was an interesting experience. So we played kind of little card games and stuff for a while, until the next kind of traditional board game came along. When she was 8 years old, which, so about a year and a half ago now when we started this, and this was Stratego. Uh, and Stratego, is a simple game, older traditional board game, but still enjoyable. So what I would do with Stratego, though, since it is, a simpler type of board game, and I was still kind of shell shocked from the response she had from Ascension when she lost that. What I did is I again kind of gave myself a game within the game to keep my own sanity. I would start with a random setup. She'd set up her tiles of Stratego, her 3 rows of tiles, and I would just grab mine out of the box and just from front to back, left, right, plop them down however they ended up, in whatever orientation and configuration they ended up in. And even doing that completely random setup, just to see how that would happen and what kind of challenges I had to work with myself, I would still end up winning about 80% of the games that we played. But the interesting thing was that she continued to want to play Stratego. So okay. So over the next year and a half or so that it's been, I kind of continued doing my random setup. And over the course of these games that we would play, I found that she started winning more and more often and would start experimenting with different strategies. She figured out, making a little wall of bombs around your flag and stuff like that, and putting certain units of different power in different spots on the board. So it's really interesting to see her learning these strategies and see them develop. This was the first game that we've played that she didn't play it the exact same way every time. And that was, again, when she was about 8 years old, 8 to 9. So that kind of age range is where she started experimenting with strategies. And that's been fascinating. In fact, it's gotten to the point now where if I do the random setup thing, she will win more often than not now. She'll beat me more than 50% of the time, and I am less and less going completely random. I'll kind of, just to get the pieces on the board, I'll just pull them out, and then I'll rearrange some of them perhaps. I haven't, and sometimes I've even experimented with doing a completely custom a couple of times. But as we play, even though I take less and less luck out of my configuration, she still is improving her gameplay and winning more and more often. And that is super exciting to see. And I think and shows a lot about the child's development and what games are appropriate for the child at the age that they're at. Each kid, of course, is going to grow differently, but that's been exciting. Which brings us to our final game on my list of games that I've played with her. Actually, I'm lying. This is the second to last. I'm sorry. The next one is about that same time with Stratego, maybe a little bit before Stratego, she also discovered Dungeon Fighter. Dungeon Fighter is the game. It's actually a dungeon crawl, but you have this big cardboard target with different values, like 1 point, 2 points, up to like 6 points in the center. You have this big cardboard target that you put on the table, and you actually throw dice at the target from across the table, and where your dice land on the target is how much damage you will deal to the monsters and such that you encounter in this dungeon. Of course, there's another wrinkle in addition to that. Some of the monsters will require you to throw the dice over your shoulder, throw them with your eyes closed, bounce them a couple times off the table. All these crazy rules that you got to do to throw the dice to make it more challenging. It's a game that's just developed to be silly and was just made for kids and family fun and just having a good time with anybody. Well, Dungeon Fighter is her current favorite game, partially because she enjoys rolling the dice. But but it's also an incredibly difficult game. At least it is whenever I play it, which may speak volumes about my ability at the game. But so playing Dungeon Fighter together, we've only beat it once, and we've played it. Oh, where is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've played it at least a dozen times, and we've only beat it once. And so I was, again, shell-shocked from Ascension, worried that if we didn't beat this game, she wouldn't want to play it again. But again, too, having only beat it once, which was maybe the 10th time we've played it out of the 12, she still wanted to play this over and over again. And I think because one of the reasons that she wanted to is because, one, it's a cooperative game, so her and her daddy are playing it together against the game, and it's silly and has dice rolling, and she's convinced that she's really good at rolling the dice over her shoulder in certain ways. She's the expert at that and always takes that dice roll if she can. So there's things for her to discover again, things for, as a kid, to discover, I'm really good at this. This is my secret talent in the game. Working together against the game. So even if you lose a lot, we're working together and we're a team. I think that has a lot to do with it. And it's also just silly and fun. And she's 9.5 right now. And just earlier this month, for the first time ever, she asked me if she could play Dungeon Fighter on one of the weekends. I said, oh yeah, we could do that this afternoon after lunch or something. And she said, no, can I just get it out and play by myself? And first time ever that she's ever taken a game off the shelf, gone and set it up by herself and played it all by herself, which was neat to see. And it was just another kind of step in her appreciation of gaming and understanding of how gaming works and what she wants to achieve out of it. And again, is about 9.5 years old. Lastly, the last game I want to mention is actually the most recent game she's been introduced to, which she was introduced to when she was 8, which is chess. Way back before I even got into modern board gaming, I always looked forward to teaching, my kid chess and being able to play that with, my kid. I always thought that was going to be a really neat experience, and it has been. I was stunned at how quickly her kid brain soaked up all the rules for each piece, and just how the game works overall. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but it was neat. And the thing I wanted to mention about chess is I think I taught it to her when she was 8, so it's been probably about a year since, and we've played it off and on. But and it's kind of been played more often. But the most interesting thing is, again, now that she's about 9.5, the most recent time, so again, like earlier this month, the most recent time that we played chess, I haven't told her this, but when I play chess with her, I kind of play on easy mode. But again, I really stink at chess, so my easy mode is probably super easy mode for a normal person. But anyway, but most recent time we played, I never told her that I play on easy mode or anything. But I did tell her the most recent time we played. I said, hey, you know what? Do you want me to go easy on you, or do you want me to actually play normal? And without even hesitation, she said, oh, no, play normal. I want the challenge. Don't go easy on me. And I was shocked. I mean, this compared to way back with Ascension and everything. And so we did. And it was a lopsided victory, but it was still enjoyable for both of us because I didn't just go in and decimate her. We went through and said, okay, if you want me to play as much of a challenge as I can, I'm going to explain to you a little bit why I'm doing certain things and ask you questions about what you're doing too. And so we played this kind of different approach to chess in a way. And I explained to her about protecting always having another piece, protecting the piece when you move it. This is why I'm moving this pawn here, because next turn I'm going to move my knight here, and I want the pawn to protect it after I move the knight. So I'm thinking a couple of turns ahead. And you can just see the light bulbs and the gears turning in her head. And it was a really interesting experience. So one of the milestones that I've had as a parent was, teaching the child chess and everything. And also, I've always thought that, I've always looked forward to about 10 years old or 4th grade. Because I remember growing up myself, 4th grade seemed to be when I really started figuring out how things worked and started looking at the world through that way competitively and things like that, instead of just being a kid going along for the ride. And she's right on that edge. So you can look now from this story where playing board games with a child, how it originated, and how it's kind of been nourished as the years have gone by. And now we're right on this cusp where we might be ready to, in the next year, introduce my daughter to even more complex games like I'm thinking of maybe XCOM or even the other game I was just about to mention. That's not XCOM. It's right over here on my shelf. I'm looking, not Panamax. That's probably still too complex for for a fourth grader. But Marvel, Legendary, XCOM, and also Mage Wars even, possibly. Oh, and Magic the Gathering. I've been looking for that. So anyway, so there you can see kind of the experience we've had and where we're going. And I hope this helps, because a lot of people have asked, what games do you recommend for kids, and what have your experience been for kids? So it's nice to have this opportunity to kind of go into it in detail, to share my experiences, to see how it might compare and educate others. Speaking of comparison, let's now finally turn this over to the comment section with the second half of the show, and let's see what people have to say. And specifically, again, use that hashtag TMG, and let's, again, whatever you want to talk about, but let's find out. I have 3 main questions I want to ask. 1, what approach do you take when playing board games with children? 2, what experiences have you had, both winning and losing, and what lessons has it taught you, not only your child, but taught you as well? And 3, which games have you had success playing with children that may not be obvious choices, like King of Tokyo and stuff like that? So, what approach do you take? What have your experiences been with winning and losing, and what have you learned? And what games have you had success with kids that may not be obvious choices? So I'm going to load up the chat here. And of course, this chat's been running since we started, so there's probably some older stuff in here that's not directly answers to those questions. But we'll start going through and we'll see what we get. So let me scroll up in the old chatteroony here. Hello, chat people. And let's start with the first TMG hashtag chat that we have here from, move this other window, from Kabuki Kid, show regular and very good contributor. Kabuki, always a pleasure. Kabuki mentions, in your Stratego game, is it the newer version which reverses the numbering system? My old game is from the 80s and has the Marshall as a 1. Now it's 10. Yes. Yeah. And I grew up with the old version of Risk where 1 was the most powerful piece. But we have one of the newer versions. It's actually, I don't know what the actual name is, if it's Fire and Ice. But it's the one that has dragons and wizards, and every piece has a special power. And we actually started out with none of that, but we've introduced all the special powers for the pieces, which is pretty cool. And she has discovered which pieces she thinks are the most powerful. The sorceresses, the number 6s, are really good pieces. And but yes, it is the current version that uses the higher the number, the more powerful the piece, which still messes me up sometimes when we play, still screws me up. But I think being introduced to her for the first time that way, I think bigger the number, more powerful the piece is actually a smart move on their part. But that's what the version we have. Okay. Someone asking me for more air quotes. Give me time. I'm sure there will be more air quotes. More air quotes, and let's scroll down here. Oh, here we go. Kabuki mentions again here that games with elimination might also make kids get upset. Oh yes, definitely try. At our local game club, one of my best friends in the club has 2 children. One I think is about 4 years older than my daughter, but he also has another son who is 1 week younger, like a week apart from my daughter. So they get along like a house on fire. And the 3 of them will often go to a side table and play kids games. And I know that we all try to avoid player elimination games with playing with a kid, because there's nothing worse than playing a game, especially when you're a kid, getting eliminated and then having to sit quietly at the table or just be bored wanting to play for 45 minutes or something. So yeah, if playing with kids, I definitely recommend avoiding games with player elimination. Someone mentions never underestimate kids. Boy howdy, that is the truth. It's amazing. They will always surprise you. Round 2 it mentions that he has a confession. I'm sorry, Round 2 it. I'm assuming Round 2 it has a confession. We have an 11-year-old in our game group who has the reputation for being as skilled as any adult. The first time I met him, we played Puzzle Strike Bag of Chips. Now, I'm not proud of my behavior, and I'm not a competitive player, but All but I was drawn in by the legends of this child and felt compelled to test the abilities and the limits of this ace. Some more air quotes for you. He was obviously frustrated, and thankfully I stopped short of utter annihilation, and he recovered, but I'm still not sure what came over me. That's a really good anecdote round to it. And I'm going to say that I can understand where you're coming from, because I can't speak for others. I can only speak for myself. But I have to admit, I have sensed that same weird phenomenon within myself. I don't know what it is, but sometimes as an adult, in that same scenario of, oh, he's really good at this, and you get that feeling of, oh really? Oh, okay. Well, let's see if you're really as good as you think. And you're playing and you're thinking like, what am I doing? I don't want to crush this kid, just back off. Makes it all the more difficult, though, to back off if the child is being cocky and smug. And but that really is something that should be removed from the game and should be addressed on its own. But and if the child is being cocky and smug, that's something that the parents should deal with that child. But if it's that own competitive, oh really? Let's see if you're as good as you think you are. That's something that we need to deal with within ourselves. But you're not alone. You're not the only person that has had that experience, unfortunately. But being aware of it is very good and a wise step. Kabuki references my reference to Jamaica. You think Jamaica is bad? Play diplomacy with preschoolers. Thankfully, totally kidding. Yeah, the only thing worse than playing diplomacy with preschoolers is losing diplomacy to preschoolers. Okay. If you really want to have an interesting experience with kids, play an RPG with a group of kids, by the way. Toon. Toon! Woo! Toon! We grew up on Toon when I was a kid. Toon is my favorite RPG to introduce kids to. Amazing fun with adults or kids. Yes! Well, let's talk about Toons real quick. I think back 20 years ago, I think Toon was published by Steve Jackson Games. Toon is an amazing role-playing game, especially for kids or teens and stuff like that. Toon is a role-playing game set in a cartoon universe. So your characters can't die, and if you lose all your hit points, you're just like out for 5 minutes or something like that. And you can do anything that you could do in a cartoon. And your skills are like, smarts and strength and chutzpah. That's one of the categories of your skill attributes. I don't know if Toon is still in print, but yes, thank you for that. Hot tip. If you're looking for a role-playing game to play with kids, Toon is an excellent one to look for if you can find a copy of it. It's simple, it's fun, it keeps the focus on the fun of the gameplay instead of being bogged down in rules. At the Gamma Trade Show, I actually spoke with a gentleman who had a role-playing game. It's one of if you look at the Dice Towers videos for the Gamma 2016 trade show, one of the interviews is with a gentleman who developed a role-playing game specifically to play with kids. It's something called Don't Be Evil or something like that. Something about evil. Sorry, Gamma is a bit of a blur of clipboards and walking around quickly. But if you're also looking for another role-playing game to play with kids, look for the one, something about Don't Be Evil, which has an interview with that gentleman in the Dice Towers Gamma 2016 trade show videos. So, okay. Sacha mentions, I guess it depends on the kid. I never was upset losing when I was a kid. Being the youngest in our family, I was happy that I was allowed to play with them at all. That might be another good point. Our daughter is an only child, but I'm the youngest of 3. So, and my older brother and older sister are 7 and 6 years older than me. So again, so they're at that age where whenever I was old enough to get excited about what they were doing, they were old enough that they were moving on to the next bigger kid thing. So being the youngest of 3, yeah, was always used to losing, and anytime I got to be involved was a special experience. So yeah, I think the number of siblings and the child's place within the siblings, I think can definitely have an impact on how gracious of a winner, a loser, and how eager they are to compete they may be. That is a really interesting point there. Thank you for bringing it up, Sasha. Whoops. Oh no, the comments jumped. So let me reorient the comments here. Find my spot. Do-do-do-do. Elimination. The confession of Round to It. Robinson Crusoe. Wait, we didn't talk about it. Oh, there we go. Keep her away from Robinson Crusoe, where the game proceeds to kick your butt regularly. I haven't played Robinson Crusoe yet, but I hear it is just fantastically brutal, and I'm actually hoping to maybe get a chance to play it at Dice Tower Con or something this year. So if there's anyone that's going to be there at Dice Tower Con and we have time, that would definitely be one I would be interested in actually finally getting a chance to play. Okay, a couple of comments here about co-ops. Co-ops are obvious choices to play with younger kids since everyone's on the same team. Just make sure to have the child have their input too, though. Oh, that is an excellent point. One of the games that I have to make a confession, I screwed up. My wife and I screwed up with as parents, mostly me. One game that we introduced to our daughter, probably when she was about 7, was Forbidden Island. And Forbidden Island is this game where you have this 3x3 or 4x4. You have this grid of tiles for this island. And the island is sinking, so the tiles are going away. And you have to collect these 4 artifacts that are hidden on the island. So but you have to do it strategically, working together as this island is sinking. And I say we beat it about a third of the time that we play it as a family. But one game that we were playing, we were, as a whole family, we were really getting into it. We were really close, but it was super challenging. We basically had like 1 or 2 turns left where we would either win or we were going to lose. And so we were all discussing strategy. And my daughter mentioned her own strategy, said, I think we should do X, Y, and Z. And we were all so excited into the game, I have to confess that I think that since she was younger, her strategy got put on the back burner and ignored. And we're like, no, we're going to do this. Mommy and Daddy both agree that we should do this instead. And we lost. And we realized that if we had used her strategy, we would have won. And she realized that too. And it led to some tears. And it led to some very, very disappointed in themselves parents who learned the lesson that if you're playing a game together with a child, you have to respect that child's input. That was the big lesson learned that day. Again, the child's growing up and learning, and you have to go into the game knowing that the child's input, is probably going to not be the most strategic advice. But again, like was mentioned already earlier, kids will always surprise you. And you have to give them the benefit of the doubt, not only to make them feel confident and included, but to help them realize, and yourself realize, that, yeah, they know, they have wheels turning. They have their own individual thoughts that are going on in these games. And I'm happy to say that we've tried to never make that mistake again in Forbidden Island. I mean, we still lose it a lot. But we try in each game to kind of set up, okay, who's kind of the captain and who's going to be kind of leading and who's going to be the one that's kind of giving out the best advice in this game. And we kind of try to rotate that. So we don't always say, oh, okay, daughter, you're always in charge. And we try to rotate it so we have a different person in charge, but we try to say, okay, the person that we've picked is the one that when we have those conflicting strategies, they're going to make the ultimate choice and we know it's on them. But, it's up to them to make the decision. It's not just going to be one person being bowled over just because of their age. So that's a very good point to bring up when playing with kids. Thank you very much for contributing that. Round 2 it mentions that he must have seen me looking over at Dungeon Fighter where I was able to quickly calculate the number of times we've played it, which is about a dozen times. He mentions, I see your dots system for the number of plays system is coming in handy. Yes, there's a board game breakfast segment I did earlier this year, where this year I'm doing an experiment. Every time I play a game this year, I'm putting a little round quarter-inch little sticker on my box, little round sticker, so I can see which games I'm playing most often this year. And yeah, it's handy in a lot of ways, isn't it? It's fantastic ideas will do that. Okay, let's move on. Oh wow, a gentleman from Greece says, "I'm glad I found you live. Greetings from Greece. Greetings to Greece." Wow, that's awesome. We have a worldwide audience there. Okay, let's get back to the questions here. And the Greece person also says it's nice to meet Kabuki Kid live too. I guess it's starting to have a reputation. And also has another statement. Kabuki mentions that kids might enjoy something a bit frenetic, like Escape. Escape is a game where you all play it at the same time. You're traveling through a Aztec temple or something, which are these little tiles that are revealed as the game goes along, and you're rolling dice, and you're rolling them in real time all together. And one person might say, "I need this, I need a key dice," and so you'll roll and say, "Hey, I have a key for you," and you give them that key dice, and then you keep rolling, and your dice can get locked down, and then you have to have people rescue you. We have played Escape. I think we played Escape last summer, so it was about almost a year ago. We got Escape, and the three of us played it as a family. And Escape also is a 15-minute game. You have 15 minutes to get out of this temple, and it has a soundtrack, an actual CD. And they also have it available on MP3 that you can download. But you play, and there's like gongs that start playing as you know you're running out of time. And when the music ends, the game, or the soundtrack ends, the game is done. It's about a 15-minute game. So yes, it's frenetic paced, lots of dice rolling, lots of working back and forth. We lost miserably, but it was a lot of fun, and we all said we would play that again. But my daughter, who was I think about 8 at the time, because this was last summer, after we got done, we put our dice down, and she looked at us and she said, "That was the most stressful 15 minutes of my life." She said it enjoyably, but so it's definitely one that was fun, but keep in mind too that things like that stress kids out a lot more than you might think too. We haven't played it very often since then, but it's always been considered, but we've mostly chosen other things. But so it didn't scare her off, but it was definitely stressful for the kid. I also had a good experience with Cat Tower with kids. Kids are surprisingly good at it. Is Cat Tower similar to Rhino Hero, where you have the actual like big cards and you're stacking those cards on top of each other to make the tallest tower you can? If I'm wrong, let me know. I've played Rhino Hero, but I haven't played Cat Tower. See, Trevin mentions, deciding to let a kid win does them a disservice, but being absolutely cutthroat and mean to them while you play can turn them off to gaming completely. So win, but win nice. I think that's good advice for everybody and everything. Win, but win nice. That's a good life approach. Yeah, I think you're right. I think throwing a game to a kid does do them a disservice. So I agree completely with what you said. I think one of the things that we touched on briefly a little bit this week is like when I was talking about Go Fish, how I kind of made a game within a game of how I kind of programmed little formulas to keep myself engaged in playing it over and over and over and over again. I personally think that wasn't a disservice because the child I was playing against, their sophistication level with the game was such that if I had tried at all, there was no way they could win. And I wasn't purposely trying to throw the game. I was kind of basically just being a robot for them to play against. Depending on the child's sophistication, I don't think that is a disservice, but I wonder if other people share the same opinion. Do people think, no, if you're doing that formulaic thing and being a robot playing, you're being a jerk to your kid. I don't agree with that, but I wonder if there are people that have that opinion too, which would be interesting to find out. Are you sabotaging your kid if you do that or not? Pengur mentions, I play with my cousins Flashpoint Fire Rescue a lot, and they love it, even though we've never won so far. Flashpoint Fire Rescue, I think, is another excellent game. That's a game where even when it first came out, I almost bought it, but I just have never actually purchased Flashpoint Fire Rescue, but I've almost bought it for that exact reason. I thought it would be a good game to introduce kids to. So Flashpoint Fire Rescue, good cooperative game that also has a theme that I think kids can really relate to, being firefighters and stuff. It's not like you're some political empire trying to invade some country. You're just firefighters. So it's a good approachable theme too. Our friend from Greece mentions that my niece used to destroy us in Catan when she was 9 years old. Again, it's amazing how quickly they will click and start to put things together and just start to exponentially excel at games too. The last time we played, the last, perhaps final time that we as a family played Catan Junior, my daughter, I was so proud of her. My daughter actually tried to corner the market on certain resources, and she crushed us, and she was obnoxious about it. Still having fun, but she purposely went out of her way to not only win the game, but she went out of her way to try and make us as miserable as possible while she was winning the game. And I gotta admit, I was a little bit proud. Still gotta teach him to be a gracious winner, but still, that was fun. Trevin mentions people don't mind losing, but don't like being crushed and humiliated, and kids are the same. I think that's a good point to point out. Being humiliated. There is such a thing to remember. You need to be a gracious winner, not only a gracious loser. There's times, if I'm playing a game with certain friends and certain people, we'll know that it's okay to be a little bit obnoxious when you're winning and such. But even that, there's a line. But I think it's not only being crushed, but being humiliated. I think that's the key point. And actually, that might be more important than the crushing part, in my opinion. Round to it mentions again that I played with a high schooler who would turn red in the face and throw a mini tantrum about how unfair it was if someone messed up their plans or beat them. Oh, that is the most frustrating thing. And if it's your own child, hopefully you have the opportunity to correct that behavior. But if it's someone else's child, I don't think it's appropriate to try to correct them yourself. You have to talk to their parent. But yeah, that is really a difficult lesson, because games are just games. What happens with the kid as they grow up and they lose stuff in life? I think we've all seen YouTube videos or in real life people that will turn bright red in the face and throw a mini tantrum about how unfair it is when they lose at things in real life. And I think gaming can establish some very important life lessons to prevent that type of antisocial behavior. I think it is really can lead to being a better person in that respect. So losing a co-op game with kids is likely easier on them because everyone loses together. I agree with that. Comments jumped. I'll find my place one more time, and we have like 5 more minutes. So see how many more questions we can eke out. We'll also see if we can find where we were. Someone making fun of my dot system. Turning red in the face. Okay. Here's a note about Eric Summerer. So if you're watching Eric, I'm not trying to be talking about you behind your back, but you came up. So, which is good because Eric, I believe, has 2 sons, and he talks about his experiences playing with them a lot, actually, on the Dice Tower podcast and stuff. So he's actually an excellent example of gaming with kids. Anyway, the comment is, if I remember right, Eric Summerer's son gravitates towards co-ops instead of competitive games. Do kids, when introduced to co-ops, prefer them, or does it depend more on their personality? I think it's going to depend on their personality, because I know even adults, some of whom gravitate towards co-ops and some who gravitate towards competitive games. I know one player in our game club who, an adult, who definitely prefers competitive games to co-ops. He wants there to be a winner, and he wants that winner to be him, but he wants there to be a winner, one person in the game who wins. And the group of friends, my best friend from high school that we go and we play with every month or so, there's about 5 of us who play. because and there's not six, because there's my wife and I, my best friend and his wife, and then my best friend's brother-in-law. But my best friend's brother-in-law doesn't play because she's very specific about the types of games she likes. She definitely gravitates more towards kind of party and cooperative games, but even with those, very, very particular. And it's extremely rare, if ever, that she joins in on it because it's just there's a very particular game she likes to play. Again, she's also an adult. So I think it's something that I don't know if it's an age thing. I think it's more of a personality thing. I might even go so far as to say it might even just be that particular mood thing. I know that there's times when my daughter wants a challenge and she wants to compete and figure something out. And there's also times that she wants more to tell a story and have an experience together. So I'm going to say I think it's more personality, but also even personality/mood more than age. But that's just my opinion. Eddie mentions, my stepdad would play with me as I grew up, and he didn't hold back, but his attitude was never rude. He always offered advice and would even let me take back a move when I realized that I messed up. Now, switching this around from the kid's perspective, that can be really encouraging. And I'm wondering, Eddie, how much that experience encouraged and grew your enjoyment of board gaming. Because, I mean, here you are watching a live stream show on YouTube about board games on the YouTube channel about board games. So definitely you had a love for board games instilled within you at some point. So I'm wondering how much that experience that you had with your stepdad reinforced and fed that and grew it. That's really cool. Okay. Let's see here. I'm going to try. We have like 3 minutes left, so I'm going to just see if I can find some more quick questions. Oh, here's a list of games here. Our Greek friend with the I'm sorry, the name in the chat is in a different language, so I can't pronounce it. But I am glad that you're here and contributing. But our Greek friend mentions the niece I was talking about earlier is now 12. And here's a list of games that they have played. They have played Catan, Formula D, Istanbul, Alhambra, Dominion, Flashpoint Fire Rescue, Carcassonne, Seven Wonders, and she's always in the top 2 to 3 players. So there, if you're taking notes, there's an excellent batch of games that I think would be, I agree, are good ones. Catan especially. I haven't played Formula D, but I want to. But Dominion, Flashpoint Fire Rescue, we've talked about, Carcassonne, and Seven Wonders, definitely I think could be really good ones. Seven Wonders, the different scoring could be a little tricky, but I imagine that the child would pick one scoring method that they understand best and would probably gravitate and jump on that scoring method and focus on it. And eventually, as they get more comfortable and learn more things, would probably branch out to try the other scoring methods that are a little more complicated. Okay. And let's see if we can find one more comment here. Here's one from Satya, which we'll wrap up with. Satya says, I don't like the idea of letting a child win because it is a child. You should never crush a child in a game, but earning your win is important. Not being upset about losing is a valuable skill. And then continues, just make sure that you give them a fair chance and that they enjoy the experience. That's a very good point. I think that is almost the thesis statement here that we can wrap up with. It's not so much about winning or losing. I think when you're playing with kids, it's that whether they win or lose, that you provide them with an enjoyable experience. Because, especially with gaming with kids, games to me aren't really so much about winning or losing. It's about that experience. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I started the game club in my own town and started going to more meetings and stuff, because I was looking for new friends and new people to share the hobby with and just, get to know. And so instilling that in a child, giving them a positive, enjoyable experience where the game can possibly be secondary, will build in social skills and appreciation for certain social things that I think that they can use, especially in give them some leverage in developing those social interactions and relationships. Anyway, so there you go. There's been my experience gaming with the kids, a child as that child has grown up, examples of the games we've played, people's thoughts on winning and losing, and fostering that healthy gaming environment, and hopefully building in some healthy gaming habits. This has been an excellent discussion, and I look forward to our next one in the next episode of The Metagame. But until then, hey, be sure to join the Dice Tower and Pair of Dice Paradise for more board game news and reviews and commentary on our YouTube channels, which I should mention, look, boom, there's our logos, and there's a subscribe button that actually doesn't do anything. Don't click it because it won't go anywhere. But if you actually do find the YouTube channels, be sure to subscribe to those and follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook as well to continue this and other conversations. But until we meet again, whether here in the chat or on social media pages, thank you for joining me. Again, I've been Chaz Marler, and together, along with the YouTube chat section, we've been playing The Metagame. Talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.